Hi, and welcome to another market review. My name is Jakub. Today is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020, and I'm going to be going over with you guys, doing a little bit of catch up from last Friday, see how the biases that I said, how they played out since last Friday. And also I want to give you guys a little bit of an update how I'm reading the market today. We have some dollar news announcement coming out in just under 2.5 hours. So I want to get this video out to you guys so you guys can have a look as to see how I'm reading the market. I also want to invite you guys to like, subscribe this YouTube channel so you can get regular updates as to when I upload. And I also invite you to follow me on Tradingview. If you go over here under ticker people and type in Jakub Primic, you can follow me on Tradingview. This is where I post ideas about what I'm seeing in the market, where I see potential pairs going, trade ideas. There I also posted a trade that I took here a couple days ago on pound Aussie, and I also just give pretty much ideas up to the date, pretty much up to the moment of what I think is happening in the market. It's a lot easier to get these ideas out here on TradingView than it is to record YouTube videos. I'm aiming for about 1 to 2 YouTube videos a week so you guys can get an update of how it is that I'm reading the market. So let's jump into it. Before we do that, like, subscribe this video, and let's jump into the DXY. So the blue pairs are pairs that I'm going to be going over. Green pairs are ones that I'm interested in, and red is that I'm live. So last week, the DXY, I was pointing out how we're decelerating at $96.5. So you can see over here, we did stall, we did decelerate in this region. At this point, we are trading below $96.5, but keep in mind with the dollar news heavy day that we have today, especially with the news announcement in just under 2 hours, we could get a little bit of movement with this CPI. So even though we are trading below 96.5, you can see over here, we had this strong bearish candle close below 96.5. We had a little bit of a pullback, and now overall price is still very bearish. This downward sloping trend line is very strong. Resistance as well as that 1 hour 50 EMA is strong dynamic. The resistance, we did have this false breakout over here previously, I believe yesterday, and now we are trading back below. So it's going to be interesting to see what the news does in about 2.5 hours, but overall my bias is to the upside if we can continue breaking this. If we don't, then it's going to continue with that bearish bias. With that being said, let's jump into dollar CAD. This is something that I'm interested in, or rather I'm keeping an eye out on. Dollar CAD, we can see that we're potentially going to be decelerating this week at 1.34. We're only midweek through the trading week, but we could potentially close as this doji candle over here on the weekly. But or we could even get a rejection of this area. I'm looking for a trade to the long side. So now that we have this deceleration at 1.34, I'm looking for a little bit of a pullback play over here on dollar CAD. We can see that on the 4-hour chart, we are decelerating over here. We have these potential double bottoms forming over here, high or low. We have this low test candle rejecting 1.34. You can see just over here on the intradays, right? We also have this potential left shoulder head, right shoulder higher high formed over here. We did pull back to 0.786 fib, but we did get this higher low forming over here. At this point, that 1 hour 50 EMA is holding price action. But if we get rid of the EMAs, just look at plain simple price action, kind of looks like a left shoulder head, right shoulder, right higher high, just a pullback. So it's going to be interesting to see again what the news brings out in about 2.5 hours, if it is the catalyst that's going to push dollar CAD up. Otherwise, this 4 hour is still in a pretty strong bearish trend. From that, let's go over to Aussie dollar. Aussie dollar is going to be inverse of dollar CAD. And what we have is, last week I was talking about the support resistance level of 0.7, and you can see that we ended up closing above 0.7 a couple days ago. Then yesterday we had this very strong bearish candle rejecting 0.7. At this point, we're getting a pullback on the intradays. I'm looking for a continuation to the short side. At this point, you can also see this left shoulder head, right shoulder on the 4-hour chart. We did close below 0.7 on the last 4-hour chart. Over here on the 1-hour chart, we had this upward sloping trend line, right? Price broke down, did pull up to that 1 hour 50 EMA. Personally, I didn't take this because I wanted to see a rejection candle before I entered long, rather short. but there could have potentially been an entry over here if you like the deceleration that was happening over here. And then at this point, price is trading above that 1 hour 50 MA, but we are holding this support at 0.7. So again, Aussie dollar being a dollar pair in a potentially 2.5 hours, we could get a potential push to the downside. And I do favor Aussie weakness. So moving on to Aussie CAD, what we have is this support resistance level of 0.94, which I talked about last week. We can see how we did fail to close above 0.94 on the weekly chart. On the daily chart, we have 1, 2, 3 high test candles. The previous two candles, again, failed to close above 0.94. So continuing with that bearish bias on Aussie CAD. On the lower time frames, you can see we have that head and shoulders, left shoulder, head, right shoulder. On the 4-hour chart, we have this downward sloping trend line. Over here, we have this third rejection over here. At this point, we are trading just a little bit above it, but who knows, we could potentially close below this downward sloping trend line. Overall, on the 1-hour chart, we're still sitting in this major range. So I do favor price to move down from here. But in regards to a trade that fits my strategy, I don't see that. But Aussie CAD calling weakness on that. On Aussie Swiss, we have this massive weekly downward sloping trend line, right? That price hasn't rejected yet. You can move this around. If you go to the wicks, you could potentially get a rejection. I just have this price sitting a little bit higher. I was talking about 0.67 support resistance level last week. Last week we did again hold that. We failed to close above it on the daily chart over here, right? Prices was pushing up, decelerating in this region. Yesterday we closed as this bearish engulfing candle. And on the intradays, nothing really here on the 4-hour chart. We're just sitting at that 4-hour 50 MA. We have this upward sloping trend line still, right? There was potentially a quick short play to the downside over here after price was rejecting this intraday resistance 1, 2, 3, 4. Then after this bearish high test candle, there could have been potentially a short play over here to that 4-hour 50 MA. I personally didn't take it as I didn't like the higher time frames as much, but different people's risk tolerance is a little bit different. So that trade would have played out to that 4-hour 50 MA. At this point, we're pulling back to that 1-hour 50 MA. We have 0.382 fib over here. I would personally like to see a pullback a little bit higher, but I think there's other cleaner trades out there. But again, with that Aussie weakness, I do see Aussie Swiss still coming down a little bit lower to this upper sloping trend line, maybe the next level of 0.644, that daily 50 MA. All right, 0.65 weekly 50 MA is in that region as well. So I do favor Aussie Swiss to the short side. Now Aussie yen, this is a little bit more interesting. I was talking about support resistance level of 0.6. Though we did close strong above that region, I do see yen strength coming in across the board, which would mean Aussie yen weakness, right? Pretty much any pair with yen as the second pair, I'm looking for yen strength, right? So every other pair would go to the downside, as the first pair would have to be weak for yen to be strong, right? Bringing, for example, something like Aussie yen down. So though we closed above $76, I do think that we can come down a little bit further. At this point, we're potentially into the third day. Well, there's 2 bearish days behind us. This would be potentially the third day of the bearish run. You can see over here on the 4-hour chart, not much there, right? We still had this higher high formed over here above 76. On the 1-hour chart, this looked a little bit nicer. This is actually a trade that I would have taken had I been awake. It was 2 a.m. During my time. So this trade over here, I ended up missing it. But what we had was this upper sloping trend line over here, right? We had this kind of intraday support resistance level. 76 support resistance is a little bit higher. But what happened is you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. You can almost bring this zone up in here, right? There was this deceleration happening over here, multiple rejections of this intraday support resistance level over here. And then what happened was price broke below that 1-hour 50 MA, right? We still had this upward sloping trend line over here, but if you stack the confluence, you can see price ended up pulling back up to 0.618 fib. This also lines up with this kind of support over here, right? What was once support turned into resistance. Price pulled back to 0.618 Fibonacci. We got this strong bearish engulfing candle, right? And you could have potentially taken an entry down here after this hourly candle close, or even on the 5-minute or 15-minute break, right? with a nice little safe stop loss, and you'd be sitting well in profit. You could have easily potentially either taken profit at that 4-hour 50 MA, or due to the higher time frame confluence, I think this can potentially still drop definitely a little bit lower, 74.25 or even 72, which would line up with that weekly or that daily 50 MA. I think price can still come a little bit lower. At this point, you either take profit at 4-hour 50, or you'd still be holding, letting it run. Right, I have these arrows marked in where I think price can go. So we're going to see in the future videos what ended up happening with price, but I do favor short Aussie yen. At this point, if you did take this trade, you're most likely sitting risk-free, probably bulletproof, right? And you're sitting probably somewhere, well, around 60 pips in profit, all right? But again, I missed that trade due to the time zone. It was 2 a.m. my time. So Aussie Kiwi, we're rejecting this downward sloping trend line for the third time. There was support resistance at 1.083, which I mentioned last week on the daily chart. You can see 1, 2, 3 pushes, right? Higher highs. You can have this kind of trend line drawn in over here. Right, so price gave us 3 rejections of this trend line. We ended up rejecting 1.083, and then we ended up having this very bearish move to the downside. So I was calling Aussie Kiwi weakness to the support resistance of 1.066. You can see that played out perfectly, right? Rejecting those weekly levels, those daily levels on the lower time frames. On the far chart, I had this range over here, this zone that I didn't want to trade in. You can see price over here came, right, pulled back up, never quite gave us a strong lower high. That's why I never took this trade. I did not like this 4-hour chart in order to take this trade. I was talking about a pullback over here previously, but it's not something that I like. But you can see price ended up definitely falling to that support resistance level of 1.066. So at this point, there's nothing that I see that I'd want to trade here right now, but it's nice to see that that buy has played out. Moving on to CAD Swiss. CAD Swiss, this was also something I talked about in regards for a quick play to the downside, and you can see 0.72 support resistance over here. We had that weekly 50 MA. Price could have continued going up a little bit higher, but we ended up finding a little bit of resistance over here at 0.72. And I was saying that we could get a pullback either to support resistance of 0.702 or this upward sloping trend line. And at this point, it looks like CAD Swiss is on its way to meet those levels. But again, there wasn't really a clean trade in there that I wanted to take. So nothing on the intradays, but the higher time frame bias is playing out. CAD yen also favoring to the short side from support resistance level of 81.75. You can see these weekly charts are all very, very bullish. So you're playing against all that strong momentum to the upside. So just quick pullback plays. And we can see 81.75 on the daily chart, resistance, support, right? Even though we had this strong bullish engulfing candle, price just pushed up, and then the following day we had this bearish engulfing, right? So again, I still do favor a little bit of a bearish push to the downside on CAD yen. Oops. Over here on the intradays, nothing really there, right? Price is now sitting at that 4-hour 50 MA. We could potentially get a little bit of a pullback to maybe 1-hour 50 MA 0.382 fib for a lower high, but it's not something that I'm going to be looking at trading. But this is just showing me that we could still potentially continue to the downside. On Swiss yen, support resistance 114.2. I talked about how we could find resistance over there. We did in fact find resistance 1, 2, 3, very strong level. We had this bearish high test candle here followed by a bearish engulfing candle. Right, we can see that price came to that 4-hour 50 MA. We pulled back up for that lower high. We did pull back up to 0.5 Fibonacci over here. We did break above that 1-hour 50 MA. Not something that I'd like, something that I want to trade at this point. Price isn't very clean over here, but I do favor continuation to the downside. But there's nothing that I want to trade there at this point. Euro Aussie, now this becomes a little bit more interesting. I was talking about a long play over here of support resistance 1.61, and I was saying I wanted to keep an eye out to see how price would reject this trend line. So though we did close below this upward sloping trend line over here, this weekly trend line, we are sitting at this support at 1.61, and I do still think we can get a push up from over here, because if you remember on Friday's video, if you go back rewatch it, I was saying I'd like to see something develop on the the daily chart before taking a long trade. So, and I was saying we could potentially get a higher low or double bottoms. And at this point, we are forming these double bottoms at 1.61. So you can see we had this push to the downside over here, followed by a bullish engulfing candle yesterday. So I'd like to see a push either to 1.655 or 1.7 on the daily chart. On the lower time frames over here, we can see we found the support 1.61, beautiful double bottoms, break of this downward sloping trend line on the 1 hour chart. This looks something that's actually setting up. So I'm interested in this. If I get a rejection candle, maybe price pulls down a little bit lower, I like to take a long trade over here. So at this point, we're sitting at a 0.382 fib, 1 hour 50 MA. I like this, but you can see prices just lost steam over here. We're struggling to close below that 1 hour 50 MA. So adding confluence for my trade bias, but at this point there's just no signal for an entry. But this is something I'm keeping a close eye out on, as we could potentially be forming a higher low over here. At this point, we just found this resistance over here. Kind of would make sense that if price broke to the upside, we kind of found a little bit of resistance over here, which lines up with that 4 hour 50 MA. So it's important to see if we're going to find that resistance and continue going falling down, or if price is actually going to find a little bit of support here on that 1 hour 50 MA 0.382 fib, and if it's going to provide me with a valid entry where I can then take that long play. And like I said, I'd be targeting 0.655 or I believe it was 0.7. What was it? Yeah, 1.7. So I'll update you to see what happens over here. Follow me on Tradingview, because if anything happens, then I'll be posting on Tradingview if there's a trade that I took. And I also write there how I manage my trades, entries, and whatnot. Euro pound, what do we have here? I was calling a short from 0.9. We ended up finding those double tops over here. You can argue head and shoulders, left shoulder ahead, right shoulder, right, and we ended up falling down to the next support resistance level of 0.887. And as you can see, we ended up retesting that region. So from here, we're either going to push up or we're going to continue falling down with a momentum of 0.87. I do favor continuing a continued bearish push to the downside over here on euro pound. At this point, you can see on the 4 hour chart, not too clean. We had that head and shoulders formation here previously, left shoulder ahead, right shoulder, right? We ended up falling. We're finding a little bit of support. What's very interesting is if we just look at very plain, simple price action over here. Whoops. Look at this. We're just looking at plain price action. You have this left shoulder, head, right shoulder, right? Look how clean price is with it when you take out kind of any kind of indicators, support, resistance lines. Of course, everything here else is here just to help us. But with that 1 hour 50 MA right now, this just looks messy. All right, but you take out the 1 hour 50 MA and you can see this head and shoulders formation that was forming over here. So at this point, what I think we could get is, let me just close this. We could potentially get a pullback a little bit higher before, let's get rid of the EMA, because right now it's not helping us. You can see right now we rejected 0.5 Fibonacci. We have this downward sloping trend line. I think we can actually come in a little bit higher. Probably not a trade I won't be taking, but just to show you how I'm reading this price action on this pair. I think we could come up a little bit higher to this downward sloping trend line, maybe 0.618 fib, and then continue dropping. Otherwise, I'm not even going to talk about the 1 hour chart, because it just looks a lot more messier than the 4 hour. I mean, if the 4 hour is messy, then that 1 hour chart is going to be that much more messier. But even with the messy chart, I try to read the price action, try to understand it, at least what's happening. And like I was saying, without the EMAs and support resistance levels, I just see that head and shoulders formation, right? So I'm looking for a push up a little bit higher, or price could just potentially fall from over here as well, but not something that I'm going to be interested in trading. On euro yen, what we have on euro yen is I was calling a short over here as well from support resistance of 124. We ended up finding resistance there, even though we had all this strong bullish engulfing momentum here from the previous 4 weeks. On the daily chart, beautiful technicals and price action. You can see how we formed this high test candle over here, right? We have this shooting star formation over here with this bullish engulfing bearish high test candle followed by bearish engulfing. So I do see further downside on this pair. The next level we're going to hit is potentially 121. On the lower time frames at this point, what we have is price came to that 4-hour 50 MA. We're pulling back up for a potential lower high. We're sitting at 0.382 fib right now. You can see how these levels are lining up as well. We have a little bit of resistance up in here, but I don't want, if I were to take this short, I want to see some sort of clean rejection that we're actually turning. All right, so price would have to come up, give me a clean sign that we're going to be reversing from that area, give me proper good risk to reward, and then I would take the straight short. But at this point, there's nothing really happening there, and no kind of clear indication for an entry to the short side, though that's what I favor. Euro Kiwi, I was talking about a potential long over here from 1.75. Personally, for me, no trade developed. At this point, we fell back a little bit lower. We're sitting at 1.72. You can see there's a little bit of support resistance at 1.72. When we go to the intradays, at this point, what we have is price fell down over here. We found this beautiful support at 1.72. You can see we had this low test candle over here, and then we bounce back up. The 4-hour chart is still very bearish. We still have lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower high. At this point, we did break above that 1-hour 50 MA, but you can see we found a little bit of resistance over here at this previous support. So I'm not personally too interested in trading this to the upside, as it's not very clear right now. Though I do favor bullish push to the upside, this 4-hour chart is still very bearish. So I'm going to sit out on that. I'm mainly focusing on the green pairs, right? Euro dollar. Again, let's see what happens at this point. News comes out, yeah, in an hour and a half, I believe. Yeah, in an hour and a half, news comes out. So dollar news. So euro dollar will most likely potentially be affected by that. This was the zone that I was talking about on Friday. We ended up trading inside this zone. At this point, we're still trading inside the zone, even though today's daily candle is now above this resistance that I have drawn in here. Price could very easily, after news, drop, and we could just get a high test candle again, rejecting the top of this zone. We have major support resistance at 1.145. It's a little bit higher, this previous high over here. All the higher time frames still look bullish, as if we could continue pushing up a little bit higher. But I wanted to point out this zone, as this could be a place where we could potentially turn to the short side from. Because if you remember, I was looking at the DXY, and I'm looking at dollar strength. So with dollar strength, euro dollar being inverted with that euro dollar weakness, right? So we could potentially even be forming these kind of double tops over here before falling to the downside. If we fail to hold a resistance over here, then I think we're on our way to see 1.145. Nothing really happening here on the lower time frames. We can just see how I have this little zone drawn in over here. You can see that we're just trading around those previous highs from yesterday. At this point, the 4-hour chart still bullish ever since we broke this resistance, support resistance level of 1.1. Right, we had this strong push to the upside. Price just created this higher high. We still have this higher low. Right now we're coming in for these potential double tops. So nothing that I want to trade yet, but this could be bearish if we reject this level from here and fall, right? Pound Aussie, so this was a trade that I ended up taking at support resistance 1.81. I was talking about this weekly support. We have this weekly upper slope and trend line, 1, 2, 3 rejections, right? We have this level of 1.81, very strong support. 3 low test candles failing to close below this region. We have this bullish engulfing candle, right, which ended up printing. At this point, I'm looking to trade to 1.85, and I think price could come a little bit higher, anywhere to 0.382 fib, right, 0.5, 0.618, which would line up with 1.9 fib. Sorry, 1.9 support resistance level, 0.618 fib lines up with there. That daily could potentially push up a little bit, line up with that region. We also have that weekly 50 MA, so a lot of confluence over here at that 1.9 region. So I'm kind of keeping an eye out to take profit over there. At this point on the 4-hour chart, we're just holding this downward slope and trend line. So that's a negative confluence that I have to break through. At this point, you can see price is still holding that. But the trade that I ended up taking was after 1, 2, 3 triple bottoms over here, right? If you follow me on TradingView, there were multiple times I was calling out along on pound Aussie. None of these trade ideas actually ended up presenting entries. I believe there was one that I did take a loss on. The other ones never actually presented them entries, but I was just seeing what I need to see in order to take this pound Aussie long. Over here is when I actually did in fact take it. So I posted this after taking the trade live. So I saw the triple bottoms over here. Price broke above that 1 hour 50 MA, pulled back to that 1 hour 50 MA. We were holding this previous resistance as support, but this was just after the market open. So I wasn't interested in taking a trade on Sunday night. I wanted to wait until the London session to see what market was going to do, especially since Friday was NFP. And you can see price pushed up a little bit higher, gave us these double tops, and then it ended up falling. And now what I ended up seeing was that price just pulled back to 0.78 fib. Right, we created this higher low. So we had these triple bottoms over here. Price pushed up. We got these highs over here, double tops rather. But price just pulled back up and created this higher low. So it's a little bit cleaner on the 4-hour chart because you can see triple bottoms over here on the 4-hour chart. Right, price then gave us this high, pulled back and created this higher low. This is what I liked over here in order to take this trade. So at this point, that 4-hour chart created a low test candle, rejecting all these fib levels. I ended up entering rather after this 1 hour bullish engulfing candle, right? And I had a nice little a safe stop loss. And I realized I had to be trading through that 4-hour 50. I wanted to keep an eye out to see what price was going to do at that 4-hour 50 MA. We ended up getting all these bullish high test candles in this region, but we had that bullish engulfing candle, right? And I thought we could still potentially continue pushing to the upside. So I kept this open, this trade open. I didn't close it down, even though I believe I was sitting at about 1.5%. Yeah, I was sitting around 1.5% at the highs over here. At this point, you can see that 4-hour 50 MA is holding price. And what we just did is we pulled back up. It pulled back to that 1 hour 50 MA. You can see we actually just closed as this low test candle over here at that 1 hour 50 MA. Right now, I believe the pound is what's pulling pound Aussie down. But I think once Aussie weakness steps in the market, then we're going to be able to take pound Aussie is going to take the next move to the upside, right? The next leg to the upside. At that point, once we break above this trend line, then I think we're gonna fly up to the upside. At that point, we could even get another potential trade, after we break and retest that 4-hour 50 MA. So at this point, keep an eye out on this. I am running just over 0.5%. So moving on to pound yen. Pound yen, what we have over here is, well, not much. I have some major support resistance at 140, the level. 139.5 is also a little bit of a range. So between 140 and 135, 139.5, a little bit of a zone. At this point, we're just falling down a little bit. So there's nothing really there that I see. There's nothing really there that I see tradable, right? We didn't even pull back to that 4-hour 50 MA. We're just sitting at this level of 137.5, a little bit of support resistance in there, right? That 1 hour 50 MA. So I do favor this to the short side, but there is nothing that I see tradable there. On pound Kiwi, we have this support resistance level of 1.94. We have this bullish candle, right? That bounce off of there yesterday. So at this point, I'm looking at the intradays to see if I could potentially get a trade in there. The 4-hour chart, we had this deceleration at 1.94. Price created this higher high. I'm looking for price to create a higher low before taking this to the upside. At this point, I still don't have anything to show me, give me a valid entry. We had a break out of this triangle formation over here. We're above that 1 hour 50 MA, pulling back up. We did reject 0.618 fib already, but at this point, I still don't see anything that would tell me that market's ready to push back up to the upside. But keep an eye out on this. Maybe there's going to be a potential trade here in the near future. On pound dollar, we have support resistance at 1.275. Price ended up reaching this level At this point, we're still trading a little bit above it, above 1.275. I do think we can still potentially drop from here, but at this point, the 4-hour chart is still bullish. Higher highs, higher lows are forming everywhere, right? We're trading above this 1.275, and nothing over here on this 1-hour chart showing me that we're ready to turn. We have this trend line over here. This actually 1-hour chart looks kind of like a wedge over here. If we get rid of this, you can actually see that we're almost forming this kind of wedge over here. So we could actually fall down from over here. So it's going to be interesting to see how the daily candle closes. So we're going to keep an eye out on this. At this point, nothing that I'm really interested in trading. But yeah, that's interesting. I do favor pound dollar short, right, with my dollar long bias again. Kiwi CAD 0.879 resistance. Again, here we're finding that resistance again, double tops over here. I don't think there's really anything on the lower time frames. A potential head and shoulders formation forming on the 4-hour chart. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder. Let's put in fibs over here, see where we're sitting at. We're sitting at 0.786 fib, so potentially creating a lower high over there, but nothing on the lower time frames in order to execute an entry. But I do favor short Kiwi CAD. Similar thing for Kiwi Yen, kind of all yen pairs. Yen gaining strength, so Kiwi Yen would be short. We have support resistance at 71. We have this nice doji candle inside bar over here, followed by this bearish engulfing. So technicals show me that we could fall down from over here on the lower time frames. Not much happening on the 4-hour chart, right? We still have room to that 4-hour 50 MA. On the 1-hour chart, we toss in fibs from the recent high to the recent low. Right, we're sitting at 0.382 fib, but again, no clear sign of a rejection here yet in order for me to enter and take this to the short side. And Kiwi dollar, we're almost done. Kiwi dollar, we're sitting at this downward sloping trend line over here. We also have support resistance at 0.65, which was broken, but we're just pulling up to this downward sloping trend line, right? We could potentially reject this region and fall down from over here. Nothing on the daily chart. Since this bullish run up, we just have this one bearish candle, so it doesn't show me like we're ready to turn. If anything, we're potentially forming double tops over here on the 4-hour chart, potentially lower high forming. Time will tell. Again, remember, we have that news coming out in about an hour and a half, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Nothing here at this moment in time. And dollar yen, what I just want to point out over here is last week I was talking about this kind of support resistance level, and even though we did close above it, you can see following that where it looked like we were going to reach support resistance at 110. What ended up happening is the market just ended up catching anybody who tried to go long to 110 and just took out any stop losses that were above this high over here. And you can see we just had 3 days of absolute massive bearish momentum where there was no momentum over here for, what is this, ever since kind of over here, ever since April 14th. We were just in this range bound market over here. You can see in 3 days how much movement we've had. So at this point, I was saying from this level, I wanted to see a short to 108, potentially to 107. You can see price never really gave an entry. We just ended up falling from this high over here to 108. Now it looks like we're going to be going towards 107 on the lower time frames. Nothing there, right? You can see that downward, that arrow that I pointed out. Price never gave an entry. We just fell off the cliff over there. And dollar CAD, I don't remember if I talked about dollar CAD at this point. I think I did. Support resistance at 1.34, looking for a long play anywhere to over here, right? I think we could even potentially see a level of 1.375 potentially in the future being hit if once the daily gives us an indication that we're turning from there. Lower time frames, right? Potential double bottoms. We're sitting at 1.34. That 1 hour chart. Oh, I did talk about this head and shoulders formation. So you can see again right now we're potentially forming this low test candle over here. We still have this EMA that doesn't make this pair look too nice, but without that we have this higher high over here. And this potential inverted head and shoulders, left shoulder, head, right shoulder, forming at 786 fib. With that, with dollar strength, CAD weakness, that would potentially also play hand in hand with oil shorts. So oil, we're sitting at this major level of $40 a barrel. Right at this point, everything else looks very bullish on this. This would just be a potential pullback play on oil. But at this point, there's still no indications of a short. We're still forming this high, respectively. So I have high, higher high, high, higher low, higher high, higher low, but we are sitting over here around this left shoulder region. So we could potentially be forming a lower high here right now, and we could potentially be falling from here. But again, there's still no indication of price moving to the downside. With gold, there is nothing that I want to trade on gold. I did talk about last week how we were sitting over here around, we are sitting above 1700. I was saying we could come down a little bit lower to that daily 50 MA before we move to the upside, and we didn't just that. Right after that, we had this bearish engulfing candle over here, right? We broke below that daily 50 MA, but at this point, we're pushing back up. All right, so price came into this bottom of the zone. You can see this previous low, price literally tapped it, and we shot right back up from there. But there wasn't no trade that fits my strategy on there. So at this point, pound Aussie, right, still holding this trade. It's being held by this downward sloping trend line. We'll see what happens. Aussie yen, we're pushing back up to that 1 hour 50 MA. We'll see what happens over there. I do favor shorts from there. Aussie dollar, we are above 0.7 right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. The hour just opened 20 minutes ago. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over here if we push up a little bit higher. And then news comes out in about an hour and 10 minutes if we can potentially get a nice push to the downside. Euro Aussie, similar thing. We're sitting at very interesting levels, but no entry here yet. So yeah, pound Kiwi as well, sitting at very interesting level, 1 hour 50 MA, rejecting 0.618 fib. I would like to see a move to the upside. We'll see if we get that. So guys, that's everything for Wednesday, June 10th, 2020 market review. I'm going to post this raw. I'm not going to edit it. So there's going to be some background noise. Forgive me for that. In the future, I'll be recording these a little bit earlier, editing them so they're nice, quick, and snappy, and I'll be posting them on YouTube. So guys, that's it for today's market review. Keep an eye out to see if the dollar actually ends up moving the market in the next hour and 10 minutes. Hopefully we do get a little bit of momentum. Hopefully my pound Aussie trade continues going to the upside. Guys, that's it for now. Make sure to like and subscribe, and leave me any comments down below. Anything that you guys want to see. Follow me on Instagram on Tradingview, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.